My name is Gladys Thompson, and at 73 years old, I never thought I'd stand helpless in the pouring rain outside my own son's home. After driving 3 hours to surprise him after 2 months apart, I watched through windows as my daughter-in-law, Diane, served a warm family dinner while deliberately ignoring my knocks. What happened next changed our family forever. Before I tell you this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from today, and please hit that subscribe button if family stories resonate with you. Life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. As a widow of 27 years, I've faced my share of challenges, but nothing quite prepared me for what happened that rainy evening at my son's house. I raised Michael alone after my husband Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack when Michael was only 11. Those early years were tough. I worked 2 jobs to keep our modest home in a decent school district. Morning shifts at the hospital as a nurse, evenings at the local diner. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself, but Michael was worth every sacrifice. We developed a bond that went beyond mother and son. He became my confidant, my reason to push forward when exhaustion threatened to overtake me. Every school play, every baseball game, I was there. When he struggled with math, I sat up with him until midnight, both of us bleary-eyed but determined. When bullies targeted him in 8th grade, we faced it together. I taught him to stand tall without becoming cruel himself. College was our shared dream. I put away a little money each month, sometimes just $20, sometimes nothing when the car broke down or the roof leaked. By his senior year, we had enough for state university with scholarships covering the rest. The day I dropped him off at his dormitory was both the proudest and loneliest day of my life. Michael thrived in college, studying business management. He called me every Sunday without fail, sharing stories of classes and new friends. During breaks, he came home instead of traveling with classmates, knowing money was tight, and I missed him terribly. After graduation, he landed a job at a marketing firm in our town. I was thrilled to have him nearby, and for 3 wonderful years, we had Sunday dinners together every week. He was building his career, and I was finally able to work just one job, giving my aging body some much-needed rest. Then Diane entered our lives. Michael met her at the firm where they both worked. She was beautiful, ambitious, and 5 years older than him. I still remember the first time he brought her to dinner. She arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and designer shoes that probably cost more than my weekly salary. Her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me, but she doted on Michael, laughing at his jokes and touching his arm constantly. I tried very hard to welcome her. I asked about her family, her interests, her dreams. Her responses were polite but distant. When I served my homemade apple pie, she declined, mentioning something about watching her figure. Michael had never worried about such things before, but that night, he pushed his plate away half-finished. Their wedding was a lavish affair, far beyond what I thought they could afford. When I gently questioned Michael about the cost, he waved my concerns away. Later, I discovered they had taken out a substantial loan, one that would burden them for years. The first year of their marriage, I saw subtle changes. Michael missed a Sunday dinner, then another. When they did visit, Diane would check her watch repeatedly or create reasons they needed to leave early. She would comment on my decor or my cooking with backhanded compliments. My kitchen was so quaint. Wasn't it amazing how I could make such tasty food on such a tight budget? Then came the announcement that shook my world. They were moving 3 hours away for better career opportunities. Michael looked torn when he told me, but Diane spoke enthusiastically about the amazing schools in that district, perfect for when they started a family. I later learned the job only offered a marginal increase in salary, certainly not worth moving away from family. After the move, communication dwindled further. Phone calls dropped from weekly to monthly. Visits became rare events that required extensive planning. When I suggested driving to see them, there was always some reason it wasn't a good time. Work stress, house renovations, social obligations. Loneliness crept back into my life. I joined a book club at the local library and volunteered at my church, but the hole left by Michael's absence remained unfilled. I sent care packages, handwritten letters, and thoughtful gifts. Sometimes these went unacknowledged for weeks. A bright spot appeared when I learned they were expecting a baby. My granddaughter Emily arrived on a spring morning, and I drove to meet her the day after Diane was released from the hospital. For a brief, magical week, barriers seemed to drop. I helped with night feedings, cooked meals, and gave Diane much-needed rest. She seemed genuinely appreciative, and I dared to hope our relationship had turned a corner. That hope faded as Emily grew. My offers to babysit were declined. Video calls became shorter. Photos arrived less frequently. When I did visit, Diane always hovered nearby, as if afraid to leave me alone with my own granddaughter. 2 months ago, communication stopped almost entirely. My calls went to voicemail. Texts received brief replies, often hours later. When I finally got Michael on the phone, he sounded rushed and distracted. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes before he claimed he had to attend to a work emergency. On a Sunday evening, then last week, I received a troubling text from Michael. Need some financial help again. Can you transfer to the usual account? We'll explain later. Then nothing, no explanation, no gratitude for previous assistance, no response to my questions about what the money was for. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. After 2 decades of putting Michael first, my maternal instinct was screaming that my son was in trouble. That's when I decided to make the surprise visit that would change everything. The morning of my visit, I woke with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It had been 2 months since I'd seen Michael and Emily. 2 months of sparse communication and growing worry. I spent hours baking chocolate chip cookies, Michael's favorite since childhood. I wrapped small gifts for Emily, a picture book about brave princesses, and a soft plush bear I'd knitted myself during lonely evenings. The weather forecast mentioned possible rain, but nothing prepared me for the storm that would unfold, both literally and figuratively. I packed an overnight bag, just in case they invited me to stay. Deep down, I knew this was unlikely, but hope is the last thing to die in a mother's heart. The 3-hour drive started pleasantly enough. Fall colors painted the countryside in vibrant oranges and reds. I listened to oldies on the radio, singing along to songs that reminded me of happier times with Robert and young Michael. Around the halfway point, clouds darkened the sky. By the time I reached their town, rain fell in steady sheets, drumming against my aging sedan. Their neighborhood looked prosperous. 2-story houses with manicured lawns and luxury cars in driveways. Michael and Diane's home stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, painted a fashionable gray with white trim. Despite the rain, I felt my spirits lift at the sight of Michael's black SUV in the driveway. They were home. I parked across the street, grabbed my umbrella, the container of cookies, and Emily's gifts. The walkway to their front door seemed longer in the rain, my arthritic knees protesting each step. I rehearsed what I'd say. Nothing accusatory, just that I missed them and wanted to check in personally. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow against the gathering darkness. My first knock went unanswered. I waited, counting to 60 before trying again. Perhaps they hadn't heard over the rain. The second knock was louder, more insistent. Still nothing. I stepped back from the door, looking up at the windows. Light glowed behind curtains. They were definitely home. That's when I noticed movement in the dining room window. The curtains there were partially open, offering a view inside. What I saw froze me in place. Michael, Diane, and Emily sat around their dining table, clearly in the middle of dinner. A fourth adult, perhaps Diane's sister, completed their party. They were laughing, passing dishes, a picture of family warmth while I stood dripping in the cold. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My first thought was, they simply hadn't heard me. I pulled out my phone and called Michael. Through the window, I watched him glance at his phone on the table. Diane quickly reached over, turned it face down, and placed her hand over his when he would have reached for it. She shook her head slightly, and he returned to his meal. They knew someone was calling. They knew someone was at the door, and they were deliberately ignoring it. Disbelief turned to hurt, as I realized what was happening. I called again. This time, my call went straight to voicemail. Had she turned off his phone? I sent a text. "I'm outside your house right now. Please let me in." No response. I knocked a third time, loud enough that there was no possibility they couldn't hear. Through the window, I saw Diane glance toward the front door, then deliberately turn back to her conversation. The rain intensified, my umbrella offering minimal protection against the wind-driven downpour. Water seeped into my shoes, chilling my feet. I considered leaving, driving back home in defeat, but something kept me rooted to that spot. A lifetime of fighting for my son wouldn't let me walk away so easily. I moved to the side of the house, thinking perhaps there was a gate to the backyard where I might knock on their kitchen door. A tall wooden fence blocked my path, its gate secured with a padlock. Who locks their backyard gate? It seemed symbolic of how thoroughly I had been shut out of their lives. Returning to the front, I watched the family dinner continue. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since a quick sandwich at a gas station hours earlier. The container of cookies grew heavy in my arms, a pathetic peace offering no one wanted. Through the window, I observed Diane's careful orchestration. Whenever Michael seemed distracted or looked toward the front of the house, she would quickly engage him in conversation or have Emily show him something. She was actively preventing him from checking the door, from discovering me standing in the rain. 1 hour became 2. My thin jacket, suitable for a brief dash from car to door, provided little protection against the elements. My hair hung in wet strands, makeup long since washed away. I must have looked like a drowned rat, but dignity had ceased to matter. Only seeing my son, understanding what was happening, drove me forward. A neighbor walked by, walking a small dog despite the weather. She looked at me curiously. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she asked. "I'm waiting for my son," I explained, embarrassment coloring my voice. "He doesn't know I'm here yet." She frowned, glancing at the house. "That's the Thompsons' place. You've been out here a while. Would you like to wait at my house? I'm just 2 doors down." Her kindness nearly broke me, but I declined. "Thank you, but I need to speak with my son tonight. It's important." She nodded uncertainly before continuing on her way, looking back over her shoulder several times. I wondered if she would call the police, report an elderly woman loitering in the rain. Part of me almost hoped she would. At least then someone would answer the door. As the 3rd hour passed, dinner concluded. The family moved to the living room, where Diane served what appeared to be pie and coffee. My cookies remained untouched in their container, growing soggy from rain seeping through the plastic lid. Then came the moment that shattered what remained of my heart. Emily, my beautiful 4-year-old granddaughter, pointed toward the front window. Her small face scrunched in concentration as she said something I couldn't hear. She was pointing at me. She had seen her grandmother standing in the rain. Diane's reaction was swift. She crossed to the window and firmly closed the curtains that had given me my only view of the family gathering. The last image I saw was Michael's back as he remained seated, unaware of what had just transpired. 4 hours after my arrival, thoroughly soaked and emotionally broken, I finally admitted defeat. My aging body couldn't take much more of the cold and wet. Pneumonia at my age could be deadly, and dying on my son's doorstep wouldn't solve anything. I trudged back to my car, each step heavier than the last. The container of cookies and Emily's gifts ended up on the passenger seat, rejected offerings to a family that wanted nothing to do with me. I sat in my car, rain drumming on the roof, and allowed myself to cry for the first time that night. Sitting in my car outside Michael and Diane's home, tears blurring my vision, I experienced a pain unlike any I'd known before. Not even Robert's death had left me feeling this hollowed out, this betrayed. My husband's passing, while devastating, had been beyond anyone's control. This rejection was deliberate, calculated, cruel. Images from Michael's childhood flashed through my mind. His 5th birthday when I worked double shifts for weeks to afford the bicycle he wanted. The nights spent in emergency rooms when his asthma attacks left him gasping for breath. The tuition payments made possible only by taking on extra work cleaning houses on weekends. Decades of putting his needs above my own, of ensuring he never felt the full weight of our financial struggles. I started the car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I couldn't face the long drive home in my condition. A quick search on my phone revealed a budget motel about 2 miles away. Not the sort of place I'd normally consider, but tonight it represented shelter, warmth, a place to regroup. The motel room was basic but clean. I peeled off my wet clothes, hanging them over the shower rod to dry. The hot shower helped my chilled body but did nothing for my wounded spirit. Wrapped in a thin motel towel, I sat on the edge of the bed and confronted the truth I'd been avoiding for years. My son had changed, or perhaps Diane had changed him. The considerate, loving boy I raised would never have left anyone standing in the rain, let alone his own mother. He had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who allowed his wife to dictate his relationships, his values, his humanity. Sleep eluded me that night. As I lay awake, staring at water stains on the ceiling, I began mentally cataloging all the ways I had continued supporting them despite their increasing distance. There were the direct loans when they bought their house, money they promised to repay but never did. The credit card I'd added Michael to for emergencies, which somehow always had mysterious charges at high-end restaurants and boutiques. The college fund I'd started for Emily, adding to it each month despite my limited income. Around 3 a.m, a disturbing thought prompted me to check my bank account on my phone. What I discovered sent a wave of nausea through me. Regular withdrawals, always for the same amount, had been occurring bi-weekly for months. Withdrawals I hadn't authorized. The timing aligned perfectly with their decreased communication. They hadn't been avoiding me out of disinterest or dislike. They'd been avoiding me out of guilt. Further investigation revealed more financial betrayals. My retirement account, modest but carefully maintained, showed recent large withdrawals. My credit card was nearly maxed out with charges in their city. The college fund for Emily had been emptied 2 weeks ago. They weren't just estranged family. They were thieves, systematically draining the resources I'd spent a lifetime accumulating. And tonight, after the final insult of leaving me in the rain, they expected me to transfer more money, no questions asked. The realization transformed my hurt into something harder, colder. Protective instincts that had always been directed toward Michael now turned inward. For the first time in decades, I needed to protect myself from my own child. Dawn found me still awake, researching my options on my phone. I learned about financial elder abuse, a term I'd never associated with my situation before. I discovered that I could place freezes on my accounts, revoke authorized users, and take legal action if necessary. Knowledge became armor, replacing the vulnerability that had defined me for too long. I faced a pivotal decision. I could continue as before, accepting emotional and financial abuse for the slim chance of maintaining a relationship with my son and granddaughter. Or I could stand up for myself, establish boundaries, and demand the respect I deserved. The first option offered a painful certainty. The second was terrifying in its uncertainty but offered something I'd lost: dignity. The maternal instinct to protect one's child, regardless of age, runs deep. Even as I contemplated cutting financial ties, part of me worried about Michael. Was he truly complicit, or was he another victim of Diane's manipulation? The text asking for money had come from his phone, but the Michael the First we'd raised would never steal from his mother. The thought that he might be controlled or coerced introduced complexity to my anger. Yet even if he was under Diane's influence, I realized continuing to enable their behavior wouldn't help him. Sometimes love requires hard decisions. Sometimes helping means stopping the patterns that allow harmful behavior to continue. As morning light filtered through thin motel curtains, I made coffee using the small in-room machine. The bitter liquid strengthened my resolve. I would no longer be the silent supporter, the convenient bank, the doormat on which they wiped their feet before closing the door in my face. I called the front desk and extended my stay for 3 more nights. This situation couldn't be resolved with a single phone call or email. It required presence, confrontation, and strength. I wasn't sure I possessed, but was determined to find. Then I began making calls. First to my bank, explaining the situation and requesting an immediate freeze on all accounts. The representative, hearing the quaver in my voice, treated me with a kindness that nearly undid my composure. She flagged the recent withdrawals as potentially fraudulent and initiated the process to investigate them. Next came the credit card company. Michael's authorized user status was revoked. Recent charges would be disputed. A new card would be issued to me alone. The insurance company required more explaining. I had named Michael and Diane as beneficiaries on my life insurance policy. That changed this morning, with my church and a children's hospital taking their places. A separate policy specifically for Emily remained untouched. She shouldn't suffer for her parents' actions. My retirement account administrator expressed concern about the withdrawals, explaining they should have required additional verification. When I confirmed I had authorized none of them, she initiated fraud proceedings and added extra security measures to the account. With each call, each action, I reclaimed a piece of myself. The helpless woman standing in the rain began to fade, replaced by someone stronger, someone willing to say no. Enough. By mid-morning, I had secured my finances as much as possible. Any attempt to access my accounts would be blocked. Any recurring payments I had been making toward their mortgage or car loans would cease. The financial umbilical cord was cut, but financial separation was only the beginning. I needed to understand how my loving son had become complicit in such betrayal. I needed to look him in the eyes when he realized the money tap had been turned off. Most of all, I needed him to know that while my love remained unconditional, my support now came with very clear conditions. I spent the remainder of the day documenting everything. Each loan never repaid. Each withdrawal not authorized. Each broken promise. The emotional accounting was as detailed as the financial one. Missed birthdays, canceled visits, the gradual exclusion from Emily's life, and finally, the image I couldn't shake, being left in the rain while they enjoyed family dinner, warm and dry inside. The evidence painted a clear picture. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary strain in family relations. This was a pattern of exploitation, emotional and financial, that had been building for years. A pattern I had enabled through my unwillingness to confront it. That night, exhausted but clear-headed, I recorded a video on my phone. I detailed the events that had brought me to this point, my discoveries, and my decisions. Not for them, but for myself. A record of this turning point, this line drawn in sand that had been shifting beneath my feet for too long. In the quiet of that motel room, I finally accepted a painful truth. The relationship I thought I had with my son had been an illusion, maintained by my willingness to provide financial support and ignore disrespect. Real love required truth. Real relationships required mutual respect. What happened next would determine whether we could build something authentic from the ruins of what I had believed we had. As I finally drifted towards sleep, I felt an unfamiliar sensation beneath the hurt. Not peace exactly, but resolve. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, and I would face it standing tall. Morning arrived with the ping of my phone. Messages had been arriving throughout the night, but I'd silenced notifications after taking my actions. Now, steel in my spine, I was ready to see their reactions. Michael, Mom, did you do something with your bank accounts? The transfer didn't go through. Michael, hello? This is important. We need that money today. Diane. Gladys, we're trying to reach you about an urgent financial matter. Please call immediately. Michael. Mom, seriously. What's going on? The mortgage payment bounced. Did you forget to transfer the money? Diane. Your credit card is showing as canceled. There must be some mistake. Call us as soon as possible. Michael. Mom? Are you okay? Getting worried now. The progression from demanding to concerned was telling. Not once did either of them ask why I hadn't responded last night. Not once did they mention my visit, or the fact they'd left me standing in the rain. Their concern extended only as far as their financial interests. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I methodically continued the process I'd started yesterday, freezing every account they might access. One by one, I closed financial doors that had been left open too long. The joint savings account established for Emily's future education. Frozen. The investment account where Michael remained a co-signatory from when he helped after Robert died. Access removed. Automatic payments supporting their mortgage. Cancelled. The life insurance policy with them, as beneficiaries. Changed. Each action required phone calls, explanations, sometimes tears. Financial customer service representatives heard more of my personal life that morning than many of my friends had over years. Some were sympathetic, others businesslike. But all helped me reclaim financial independence I had gradually surrendered. Around noon, I called James Peterson, the family lawyer who had handled Robert's estate and had occasionally assisted Michael with legal matters. His secretary initially tried to deflect my call, saying he was with a client, but when I explained it concerned possible financial elder abuse, she put me through immediately. "James," I began, "I have reason to believe Michael and Diane have been making unauthorized withdrawals from my accounts." His silence spoke volumes before he finally responded. "Gladys, these are serious allegations. Are you certain?" I detailed the withdrawals, the credit card charges, the emptied college fund. His professional demeanor cracked slightly. "I was afraid something like this might happen," he admitted. "Michael consulted me recently about gaining power of attorney over your affairs. He mentioned concerns about your memory, your ability to manage finances. I told him it would require your consent or a court finding you incapacitated. He seemed disappointed. The revelation sent a chill through me. They had been planning to take legal control of my assets, using false claims about my mental capacity. The betrayal deepened. Cutting into places I didn't know could still feel pain. James guided me through documenting the unauthorized transactions. He explained that, while I could pursue criminal charges for financial fraud, starting with civil remedies might be wiser. He would prepare demand letters for the return of misappropriated funds. He would also help me create new estate planning documents that would protect me from any future attempts to declare me incompetent. After ending the call with James, I contacted my younger sister Margaret in Arizona. We weren't particularly close, geography and different life paths having created distance over decades. But she needed to know what was happening, especially since she was next in line for power of attorney should anything happen to me. Margaret was appropriately outraged. She had never warmed to Diane, calling her a social climber at their wedding. Her immediate offer to fly out and support me touched me deeply, but I declined. This was my battle to fight. Her awareness and backup were enough for now. By mid-afternoon, my phone was buzzing constantly. Michael and Diane had progressed from confused to panicked. The financial consequences of my actions were clearly hitting home. Mortgage payment rejected. Credit access terminated. Investment accounts locked. Finally, I responded with a single text to Michael. "I came to your house last night. Stood in the rain for 4 hours while you had dinner. We need to talk, but not on your terms. I'll contact you when I'm ready." His response was immediate. "What are you talking about? You weren't at our house." The blatant lie solidified my resolve. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I recorded another video, more detailed than the first. I listed each financial transgression, each emotional slight. I explained my actions and my reasons calmly, without the tears that had marked yesterday's recording. This video wasn't for them, or even for me. It was for Emily. Someday, when she was old enough to ask questions about her grandmother, there would be truth rather than whatever narrative Diane might create. The next decision was harder. Should I return home or stay and force a confrontation? The thought of the long drive back to an empty house, mission unaccomplished, was unbearable. Yet remaining meant facing them directly, a prospect that sent anxiety coursing through me. In the end, there was no real choice. Running away would solve nothing. I extended my motel reservation for a full week. As evening approached, a new message from Michael arrived. "Mom, whatever you think happened, we can talk about it. But please undo what you did with the accounts. We can't pay our bills. Emily needs things for school." The mention of Emily, the attempt to use my granddaughter as leverage, ignited a slow-burning anger. I typed a response. "I've supported you financially for years. Last night, you left your mother standing in the rain for 4 hours while you enjoyed a warm family dinner. You lied about being home. You've taken money without permission. We will talk, but first, you need to understand there are consequences for how you've treated me." A moment later, my phone rang. Michael. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready to hear his voice, his excuses. The message he left was a study in manipulation. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. We weren't even home last night. You must have been at the wrong house. And these allegations about money are crazy. We've never taken anything you didn't offer. Please, you're scaring us. Call me back. I love you." His voice sounded genuine, concerned. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Had I made a terrible mistake? Had I somehow gone to the wrong house? Was I losing my grip on reality? Then I remembered Diane closing the curtains when Emily spotted me. I remembered Michael's phone being turned face down. I remembered the black SUV in the driveway, the lights on inside, the family gathered around the table. There was no mistake. The only confusion was in Michael's deliberate gaslighting. That evening, I created a detailed spreadsheet documenting every financial interaction over the past 5 years. Loans made, repayment promises broken, unauthorized withdrawals. The total was staggering. Nearly $87,000. Money that represented years of careful saving, overtime shifts, modest living, money that should have secured my retirement but instead had vanished into their lifestyle. The emotional toll of these discoveries left me exhausted. Yet beneath the hurt and betrayal, something else was emerging. A determination, a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Michael needed to understand that his actions had consequences. Diane needed to recognize that I would no longer be her personal ATM, and I needed to establish boundaries that should have been set long ago. Tomorrow would bring confrontation. Tonight, I would prepare. I saved copies of all financial records to my phone. I wrote down exactly what I wanted to say, points I needed to make. I role-played potential scenarios, their likely excuses, my responses. For the first time since Robert died, I felt truly alone, yet paradoxically stronger than I had in years. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized my actions weren't just about money or even respect. They were about truth, the truth of who my son had become, the truth of what our relationship had devolved into, the truth about Diane's systematic campaign to isolate and exploit me. Truth could be painful, but living in illusion had proven far more damaging. Whatever happened next, it would be grounded in reality rather than the comforting lies I had told myself for far too long. The next morning, my phone displayed 27 missed calls and 43 text messages. Michael and Diane had apparently spent the night in escalating panic as the full extent of their financial predicament became clear. Their messages traced a journey from denial to anger to desperate bargaining. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me feel confident and dignified. Navy slacks, a cream blouse, sensible shoes I could stand in for hours if necessary. I applied light makeup, covering the shadows under my eyes from restless sleep. My silver hair went into a neat bun. The woman in the mirror looked older than I remembered, but also somehow stronger. Around 10 o'clock, a knock at my motel room door startled me. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. Heart racing, I approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. Michael stood there alone, unshaven, hair uncombed, wearing wrinkled clothes that suggested he'd slept in them. He looked nothing like the polished professional I was accustomed to seeing. This Michael appeared broken, desperate. I opened the door but didn't invite him in immediately. We regarded each other in silence for a long moment. "How did you find me?" I finally asked. "Called every motel in town," he admitted. "Been driving around all morning." His eyes were red-rimmed, either from crying or lack of sleep. Despite everything, maternal instinct stirred. I stepped aside to let him enter, maintaining emotional distance even as I closed the physical one. The room felt smaller with him in it. He perched awkwardly on the edge of the bed while I took the single chair by the small desk. Neither of us spoke for several uncomfortable minutes. "You weren't at the wrong house," he finally said, breaking the silence. "We were home. I knew you were outside." The admission hung between us. I waited, giving him space to continue, to explain the inexplicable. "Diane said you were just trying to manipulate us. That if we let you in, you'd try to take over our lives again." He stared at his hands as he spoke. "She said you've always tried to control me, that you can't accept I have my own family now. I knew it was wrong to leave you out there, but she convinced me it was necessary. To set boundaries." Boundaries? I kept my voice level despite the fury building within me. "Boundaries are discussed openly, Michael. Boundaries don't involve stealing from your mother's accounts or leaving her in the rain. Boundaries are about respect, not cruel manipulation." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Mom, we never stole from you. Everything you gave us was voluntary." I pulled out my phone, opened the spreadsheet I'd created. "Was it voluntary when you withdrew $3,000 from my retirement account last month? How about the $2,000 from Emily's college fund? Did I volunteer for those?" His face crumpled. "That was Diane. She has access to your accounts through the paperwork you signed when we moved. She said you wanted to help us, that you'd offered." The paperwork I'd signed had been for emergency access, not regular withdrawals. I had indeed wanted to help them, but on my terms, with my knowledge. This wasn't help. This was theft. "And you never questioned why your mother, who lives on a fixed income, would suddenly want to give you thousands of dollars without even mentioning it?" I asked. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. It became clear to me then. Michael wasn't just Diane's co-conspirator. He was also her victim, in a way. She had isolated him not just from me, but from his own moral compass, his sense of right and wrong. "Tell me the truth, Michael. All of it. Now." What followed was a confession that broke my heart anew, yet also explained much that had confused me. Diane had gambling problems, serious ones. Online casinos, sports betting, secret credit cards. She had maxed out their own accounts before turning to mine. The lavish lifestyle they portrayed was largely illusion. Their beautiful home mortgaged to the hilt, their credit destroyed. More disturbingly, she had threatened Michael repeatedly. Not with physical harm, but with something he feared more. If he didn't comply with her demands, didn't maintain the facade she created, she would take Emily and leave. She would ensure he never saw his daughter again. "Is that why you asked for power of attorney over my finances?" I asked. "Because James Peterson told me about your recent inquiry." Michael's face registered shock. "Mom, I never discussed anything like that with James." Another of Diane's manipulations, then. She had likely posed as Michael in communications with the lawyer, laying groundwork to gain control over my assets by having me declared incompetent. As Michael continued talking, the full picture emerged. Diane had systematically isolated him, much as she had isolated me. Friends who asked too many questions were dropped. Family visits became rare. His work life was carefully monitored. She checked his phone regularly, deleted messages she didn't approve of, controlled their social media presence to project perfect family happiness. The strong, confident son I'd raised had been replaced by this shell of a man, beaten down by years of emotional manipulation. My anger toward him didn't disappear, but it was tempered by understanding. And my determination to fix this situation only grew stronger. "Why are you telling me all this now?" I asked when he finally fell silent. "What changed?" He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time since entering the room. "Last night, after your message about standing in the rain, I confronted Diane. Really confronted her, not just accepted her explanations. She admitted you had been there, that she'd seen you. She laughed about it, Mom. Said it was about time you learned your place." His voice broke on the last word. Something in me broke too, the last hope that there might be an innocent explanation, that Diane might somehow be redeemable. Then this morning, when none of the accounts worked, when the mortgage company called about the missed payment, she completely lost it. Started throwing things, screaming at me that I'd ruined everything by contacting you. She admitted taking money from your accounts without your knowledge. Said you owed us anyway for all the times you'd interfered in our marriage. I realized then how wrong everything was. How wrong I've been. He began to cry, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sight of my adult son breaking down should have moved me to comfort him immediately. Instead, I sat perfectly still, processing his words, weighing sincerity against potential manipulation. "Where's Emily in all this?" I asked. "At school," he replied, wiping his eyes. "Diane's sister picked her up this morning. She's staying there tonight. Diane said she needs space to figure things out." "And what do you want now, Michael?" I kept my voice neutral, though my heart raced with concern for my granddaughter. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I want out, Mom. I want to take Emily and leave. But I'm scared. Diane has all our accounts in her name. The house is in her name. She has all these text messages she made me send, making it look like I'm unstable. She'll use them against me in a custody fight." For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not that things could return to how they were before, but that Michael might find his way back to himself, that Emily might be rescued from a toxic environment. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, face paling. "It's Diane. She's figured out where I am. She's coming here." The prospect of facing Diane in a confined motel room didn't appeal to me. Too many opportunities for her to manipulate the situation, to create a scene, to twist words and emotions. "We need to go somewhere else," I said, already gathering my purse and jacket. "Somewhere public." We left the motel minutes before Diane's red sports car screeched into the parking lot. Michael drove us to a coffee shop downtown, a neutral location where raised voices would be inappropriate. As we sat across from each other at a small table, he seemed to grow incrementally stronger, more resolved. "I need your help, Mom. Not money this time. Just help me figure out how to protect Emily. How to start over." The request was sincere, the need genuine. Despite everything, despite years of neglect and recent betrayal, he was still my son, and Emily was still my granddaughter. Family ties, I was discovering, could bend to near breaking without being completely destroyed. "I'll help you," I told him, "but only if you're honest with me from now on. Only if you recognize how wrong your actions have been. And only if you're truly ready to stand up to Diane, not just run from her." He nodded, a glimmer of the Michael I'd raised returning to his eyes. "I think I've been waiting for someone to help me see clearly again. I'm so sorry, Mom. For everything. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal challenges, emotional reckonings, and hard decisions. But for the first time in years, we would walk it together, mother and son united against a common threat. As we formulated a plan, my phone buzzed with a message from Diane. "You've turned my husband against me. You'll regret this interference. I know things about you that would shock him. Don't push me." I showed Michael the text. Her attempt at intimidation only strengthened our resolve. Whatever secrets Diane thought she had, whatever lies she might invent, truth would prevail. It had to. The next morning found Michael and me in the office of James Peterson, family lawyer turned unexpected ally. The elegant conference room with its leather chairs and mahogany table felt like a battleground where our future would be decided. James listened gravely as we detailed Diane's financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and threatening behavior. "First, we need to document everything," James said, spreading papers across the table. "Financial records, text messages, emails, anything showing unauthorized transactions or abusive behavior." Michael produced his phone, showing messages where Diane had threatened to take Emily away if he didn't comply with her demands. I provided bank statements highlighting withdrawals made without my knowledge or consent. Together, the evidence painted a disturbing picture of systematic manipulation and fraud. James recommended immediate action on multiple fronts: a formal demand for repayment of misappropriated funds, consultation with a family law specialist about Emily's custody, and possibly involving law enforcement regarding the financial exploitation. Michael seemed to grow more determined with each step of planning. The passive son who had allowed his wife to mistreat his mother was being replaced by a man fighting for his daughter's well-being and his own freedom. After leaving the lawyer's office, we met with Sarah Goldstein, a financial advisor specializing in cases of financial abuse. She reviewed the complex web of accounts Diane had created, transfers designed to obscure the source of funds, and credit lines opened in my name without my knowledge. The news was worse than I'd imagined. Beyond the $87,000 I'd identified, Sarah uncovered another $35,000 in fraudulent transactions, carefully hidden through multiple transfers. Diane had been systematically draining my resources for years, not months as I'd initially thought. One thing puzzled me still. Where had all this money gone? Michael and Diane lived well, but not extravagantly enough to account for such sums. Sarah's investigation provided the disturbing answer. Large cash withdrawals, transfers to online gambling sites, payments to what appeared to be private lenders, possibly loan sharks. Diane's gambling problem was apparently far more severe than even Michael had realized. This wasn't just about control or greed. She was feeding an addiction using my retirement savings and her family's financial security. By early afternoon, we had assembled a comprehensive file documenting the financial abuse. James would use this to initiate civil proceedings for recovery of funds. Sarah would help restructure my accounts with enhanced security. But the most difficult task still lay ahead. Confronting Diane directly, Michael insisted on returning home to gather essential documents and clothes for himself and Emily. I argued against it, fearing Diane's reaction. But he was adamant. I need to face her, Mom. I've been running and hiding for too long. We agreed on a compromise. He wouldn't go alone. I would accompany him, along with James, who offered his presence to help prevent the situation from escalating. We would arrive when Emily was still at her aunt's house, avoiding exposing the child to potential conflict. The drive to Michael and Diane's house felt surreal. Just days ago, I had stood in the rain outside this very home, an unwelcome intruder in my son's life. Now we approached together, united in purpose if still healing in relationship. Diane's car sat in the driveway. The house looked peaceful from outside, giving no indication of the turmoil within its walls. Michael used his key to open the front door, calling out as he entered. "Diane, we need to talk. My mom is with me." The sound of breaking glass came from the kitchen, followed by Diane's appearance in the hallway. She looked disheveled, her normally perfect makeup smudged, designer clothes replaced by a rumpled robe. Her eyes widened at the sight of me standing beside Michael, then narrowed dangerously. "What is she doing here?" she demanded. "This is our home, Michael. You can't bring her here without my permission." Michael stood straighter, shoulders back. "Actually, I can. My name is on the deed, too. And we have serious matters to discuss." James entered behind us, introducing himself. Diane's expression shifted from anger to wariness. "Why is your lawyer here? What's going on?" We moved to the living room, the same room where I had watched them enjoying dessert while I stood in the rain. Diane remained standing while the rest of us sat. A physical representation of her refusal to engage on equal terms. Michael spoke first, his voice steadier than I'd heard in years. "I know about the gambling, Diane. I know about the money you've taken from my mother's accounts. I know about the threats you've made. It stops today." Diane's laugh was brittle. "What are you talking about? Your mother offered to help us financially. She signed those account access forms willingly." "And what gambling? I occasionally play online poker. It's a hobby, not a problem." James produced a folder containing statements from multiple gambling sites, showing tens of thousands in losses. Michael's face registered shock. Even he hadn't realized the full extent of her addiction. Diane's defense crumbled visibly. Her posture changed, aggression giving way to something more calculating. "Fine," she said. "I may have a small gambling issue, but that doesn't change the fact that your mother has always tried to control our lives. She's manipulating you now, turning you against me. We can get help for my gambling, but sending her away is the only way our marriage survives. She was good, I had to admit. Even now, backed into a corner with evidence of her deception spread across the coffee table, she attempted to reframe the narrative, to make me the villain of the story. Michael didn't waver. No, Diane. Mom isn't the one who's been manipulating me. You are. You left her standing in the rain for hours. You stole from her accounts. You threatened to take Emily away if I didn't comply with your demands. It's over. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between them. Diane's face transformed, rage replacing calculation. You can't leave me, she hissed. I'll destroy you. I'll tell the court you're mentally unstable. I'll make sure you never see Emily again. You're nothing without me, Michael. Nothing. Each threat she uttered only confirmed the rightness of Michael's decision. I watched my son absorb her words without flinching, without backing down. We have everything documented, Diane, he said quietly. The financial fraud, the emotional abuse, the gambling addiction. No judge will give you full custody under these circumstances. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Diane's face. Her gaze darted to James, who nodded confirmation of Michael's statement. What do you want? She finally asked, voice smaller. I want shared custody of Emily, Michael replied. I want repayment of the money you took from my mother. And I want you to get help for your gambling. It was a generous offer, more generous than I might have made in his position. But Michael had always possessed a kindness that surpassed my own. Diane's response was unexpected. She began to cry. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen her use before, but deep, body-shaking sobs. She sank to her knees on the expensive rug, composure completely shattered. I can't pay it back, she gasped between sobs. The money's gone. All of it. And there's more. Debts you don't know about. People who will come after us. I'm in so deep, Michael. I don't know how to get out. Her confession unveiled the final piece of the puzzle. Diane's controlling behavior hadn't been purely about power or dislike of me. It had been about hiding her addiction, about maintaining access to funds to feed her gambling and pay off dangerous debts. The perfect exterior she presented to the world concealed a woman spiraling into self-destruction. Michael moved to kneel beside her, not touching but present. I can't fix this for you, Diane, but I can support you getting the help you need. For Emily's sake, if nothing else. In that moment, watching my son offer compassion to the woman who had caused us such pain, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in the man he had become despite everything, sadness for the broken family before me, and a cautious hope that from this painful truth-telling, something healthier might eventually emerge. Diane looked up at me, makeup streaking her face. I'm sorry, Gladys. I never meant for it to go this far. When it started, it was just small amounts, just borrowing until a big win would fix everything. Then it spiraled, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't admit what I'd done. Her apology seemed sincere, but I'd been fooled by her before. Actions would matter more than words in the days to come. I knelt slowly, my aging knees protesting, until I was at eye level with my daughter-in-law. I don't forgive you yet, Diane. That will depend on what you do next. But I believe people can change if they truly want to. For Emily's sake, I hope you do. James cleared his throat, bringing us back to practical matters. We need to discuss next steps, he said. There are legal and financial issues to address, and Emily's well-being must remain the priority. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. Diane agreed to enter treatment for gambling addiction. Michael would temporarily move into my motel room, then find an apartment where Emily could stay with him part-time. James would draw up separation papers that included provisions for repayment of the stolen funds, though we all recognized full restitution might never be possible. Throughout the discussion, Diane remained subdued, occasionally offering information about hidden accounts or unreported debts. The extent of her financial deception was staggering. She had created a house of cards that was now collapsing around all of us. As we prepared to leave, Emily's photograph on the mantel caught my eye. an innocent child whose world was about to change dramatically. I silently promised my granddaughter that whatever happened next, she would know stability and love, even if her family structure was changing. Michael gathered essential documents and clothes while Diane watched silently. When he hesitated over Emily's favorite stuffed bear, Diane spoke up. "Take it. She can't sleep without it. And tell her. Tell her Mommy loves her and will see her soon." It was the first truly maternal sentiment I'd heard from her. Perhaps somewhere beneath the addiction and manipulation was a woman who loved her daughter, who might find her way back to being a good parent with proper help. As we left the house, I took one last look at Diane. She stood in the doorway, a broken woman facing the consequences of her actions. The satisfaction I had anticipated feeling at this moment was absent, replaced by a complicated empathy. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition of shared humanity, shared frailty. The true victory wasn't in seeing Diane brought low, I realized. It was in watching Michael stand tall again. It was in knowing Emily would grow up with honesty rather than pretense. It was in my own reclaimed dignity and strength. The rain had stopped. The sun broke through clouds as we drove away, a visual metaphor too perfect to ignore. The storm hadn't destroyed us. It had washed away illusions, leaving clarity in its wake. 1 year passed, bringing changes I could never have imagined that rainy night outside Michael's house. The journey wasn't easy. Each step forward sometimes followed by slides backward. But progress came steadily, measured in small victories and growing strength. Diane entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. The first month, she called daily with tearful apologies and promises to make everything right. Michael maintained compassionate boundaries, supporting her recovery while protecting himself and Emily from further harm. I admired his balance, his ability to offer kindness without surrendering wisdom. Financial reconstruction proved more challenging than expected. Diane's gambling had created a labyrinth of debt, extending far beyond what we initially discovered. Michael faced the difficult choice of filing for bankruptcy or spending years paying off loans he hadn't known existed. With guidance from Sarah Goldstein, he chose the latter path, accepting responsibility while negotiating manageable payment plans. My own finances required careful rebuilding. The stolen funds represented a significant portion of my retirement savings. At 73, I faced limited options for replenishing them. I sold my house, moving into a smaller apartment that reduced my expenses. I returned to part-time nursing work, my aging body protesting, but my spirit strengthened by renewed purpose. Michael found a modest 2-bedroom apartment near Emily's school. He transformed the spare room into a princess paradise for his daughter, painting walls lavender and hanging fairy lights across the ceiling. Those weekends when Emily stayed with him became treasured time for both of them. And for me as well when invited to join their adventures. Emily, resilient as only children can be, adapted to her new reality with remarkable grace. At 5 years old, she understood only that Mommy was getting special help to feel better, and that she now had 2 special homes instead of 1. Michael and I agreed that she should never hear negative words about Diane from either of us, regardless of our personal feelings. Family therapy became a regular part of our lives. Initially, just Michael and me, working through decades of patterns that had contributed to our damaged relationship. Later, Diane joined some sessions, facilitating carefully structured interactions focused on co-parenting Emily effectively. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, guided us through difficult conversations with wisdom and firmness, never allowing old patterns to resurface unchallenged. 6 months after that confrontation in Michael and Diane's living room, we established a formal financial oversight plan. Any money changing hands between family members would be documented and approved by Sarah. Regular financial reviews ensured transparency. Michael regained control of his personal accounts, while Diane's finances remained under supervision as part of her recovery program. Trust rebuilt slowly, in tiny increments. The first time Michael called just to chat, not to discuss logistics or problems. The Saturday morning Diane dropped Emily at my apartment with a hesitant smile and homemade banana bread. The family birthday celebration for Emily, where we all managed to focus on her joy rather than our complicated emotions. Small moments of healing accumulated like droplets forming a river, carrying us towards something new. Christmas brought a particularly meaningful milestone. Michael hosted dinner at his apartment, Emily proudly helping arrange decorations and place settings. Diane, 9 months into recovery and living in a halfway house, joined us by invitation. We weren't the picture-perfect family shown in holiday movies, but we were genuine. When Emily opened the handcrafted dollhouse I'd spent months creating, her squeal of delight bound us together in shared happiness, if only for that moment. Through it all, I discovered parts of myself long buried under maternal sacrifice. I joined a senior painting class, revealing an artistic talent I'd never explored. I found friendship with 2 widowed neighbors, our weekly card games becoming highlights of my calendar. I even began dating Gerald, a kind retired teacher I met at church. At 74, I was experiencing a personal renaissance while helping my family heal. The most profound transformation occurred within Michael. The passive young man who had surrendered his agency to Diane evolved into someone stronger, more defined. He received a promotion at work, his confidence flowing into professional success. He established clear boundaries with everyone, including me, articulating his needs without apology or resentment. Sometimes I barely recognized him, yet glimpsed the essential goodness that had always been his core. Diane's journey proved more complex. Her recovery included relapses, weeks of progress undone by single impulsive decisions. Yet she persisted, moving from residential treatment to outpatient therapy, securing a job at a local bookstore, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings thrice weekly. Her relationship with Emily remained her primary motivation, each supervised visit strengthening her commitment to change. One unremarkable Tuesday, exactly 1 year after the confrontation, Michael invited me to dinner at a local restaurant. I arrived to find Diane already seated at the table, nervous but composed. Michael had arranged this meeting, feeling we were ready for a conversation without mediators or lawyers present. As we awkwardly exchanged pleasantries, Diane suddenly reached for my hand across the table. Her eyes, clear of the manipulation I'd grown to recognize, met mine directly. "I want to thank you, Gladys," she said, "for not giving up on our family even when I gave you every reason to. For seeing something worth saving when all I showed you was cruelty. I'm still working through my issues, but I'm seeing things clearly for the first time in years. What I did to you was unforgivable." I studied her face, searching for insincerity and finding none. The woman before me wasn't the same person who had closed the curtains when Emily spotted me in the rain. Recovery had stripped away layers of defensiveness, revealing someone humbler, more authentic. "None of us are beyond forgiveness, Diane," I replied carefully. "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't mean things return to how they were before," she nodded. "I know. I'm not asking for that. I just want a chance to show Emily that people can make terrible mistakes and still find their way back to decency. And I want to make amends to you, even knowing I can never repay all I took." Michael watched our exchange silently, his presence supportive but allowing us our own resolution. I realized he had orchestrated this moment not to pressure me but to facilitate healing he believed possible. As our meal progressed, conversation flowed more naturally. We discussed Emily's upcoming school play, Michael's promotion, Diane's new job. Beneath the ordinary topics ran deeper currents of change, of lessons painfully learned but permanently integrated. That dinner marked a turning point. Not a fairy tale ending where all wounds magically healed, but a conscious decision to move forward with truth rather than illusion as our foundation. The family that emerged from our crisis was fundamentally different from the one that entered it. Stronger in some ways, permanently scarred in others, but ultimately more authentic. Looking back on that rainy night when I stood outside my son's house, heartbreaking as I watched them through the window, I recognize it as both an ending and a beginning. The end of enabling unhealthy patterns. The beginning of genuine relationships built on respect rather than obligation or manipulation. The pain of that night catalyzed changes none of us could have imagined. Life continues to present challenges. Diane's recovery progresses with occasional setbacks. Michael balances single parenthood with rebuilding his career. I adjust to a more modest retirement than planned. Yet, underlying these practical concerns is a profound appreciation for truth, for boundaries lovingly maintained, for relationships based on choice rather than coercion. The most valuable lesson from our family crisis was one I wish I'd learned decades earlier. True love requires both compassion and boundaries. Supporting someone doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Sometimes the kindest action feels like the cruelest in the moment. Standing in the rain that night was my breaking point. But it was also the first step toward healing for our entire family. If you're facing similar struggles with family members who take advantage of your generosity or manipulate your emotions, remember that establishing boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for genuine relationships to flourish. Have you experienced situations where setting limits actually strengthened your connections with loved ones? Share your stories in the comments below. Before you go, please hit that subscribe button if you found value in this story. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons with others who might benefit from them. And remember, sometimes the hardest moments in our lives lead to the most meaningful transformations. Thank you for listening, and may wisdom guide your own family relationships through whatever challenges you face.